Okay, I've been recording for a little bit, and I've been singing Wicked songs, but I'm ready to talk about The New Yorker, because a month ago, I said that I would read every issue of The New Yorker that came out in November and do a video about them, and I am nothing if not true to my word. What a day I have had. It's been a retail hell day. If you work in retail, you know that this time of year is when people start to go batshit insane and speak to you like they've never set foot on planet Earth before. So it's been a long ass day, but I was so excited to come home and talk to you lovely people about a fine literary establishment, and that is The New Yorker magazine. I have all 4 issues of The New Yorker that came out in November. As you can see, I sticky tabbed articles. So what I'm going to do is go through my sticky tabs, talk about what I read and what I liked of what I read. We're going to go throughout the month. We'll start with November 4th and we'll end with November 25th. I already have the December 2nd issue. It's sitting on my bed. I started reading it last night. And we'll talk about that in the December video, okay? This is the November 4th issue of The New Yorker. We're starting here. That was the first issue of the month. The cover was a watercolor of the New York Marathon, which happened at the beginning of November. I have 2 stickies, so let's just go straight to them. I stickied things that I wanted to talk about, and that's basically it. So I don't really feel like there's any point in going through the rest of it. I have quite a few articles to get through over the course of this month. So first article is from the Talk of the Town section. This is the section at the beginning of the magazine where they have small little, not really puff pieces, I guess sort of like human interest stories of usually stuff happening in New York, but it could be outside of New York as well. And they're usually pretty short. They're just sort of like little bite-sized articles. The one that I highlighted is called Who's That Girl? No Pink Please. No Pink Please. This was written by Bob Morris. It's quite short. It was about a page. It was about a page, and it is about Madonna's daughter DJing. Girl, why are we sticking? Why are we sticky? Madonna's daughter DJing an event at the Museum of Art and Design in Manhattan. She is 12. She's 12. And she's like a student DJ. I mean, she goes to school as well, but she's also like apprenticing as a DJ to a friend of Madonna's. And she DJ'd this event and she took her art really seriously, which is great. It was like a Barbie event or something. So it makes sense they had like a young girl DJing. And everyone that the journalist interviewed at this event was like, it's crazy that she's like a talented 12-year-old DJ who's booking gigs. Yes, she's a Nepo baby, but still. And there were some quotes I liked in here. One was from an artist named Beau McCall, who said, "When I was 12, I wanted to be 13. I wanted to be a teenager, but when I became one, nothing happened." Which is pretty much my entire teenage experience as well. Nothing happened. It was so uneventful. Which is good. I mean, whatever. This Mattel executive spoke, and he was just so like such a canned response. It was, "This opening is a very good gig for a 12-year-old DJ. I admire any kid with the presence of mind to know herself so young." Yeah, it was funny. It was like a silly little piece. That's what these mostly are. Then, things were less funny. Things got very serious. The second article that I bookmarked was in a section titled "A Reporter at Large." This article was called "The Last Mile," semicolon, "The aid workers who risk their lives to bring relief to Gaza." It's written by Dorothy Wickenden, and it was an article about first responders in Gaza, and it interviewed people who live in Gaza who have been displaced from their homes. I have some highlighted sections. Oxfam reported that people there were subsisting on the equivalent of less than a can of beans per day, and that 95% of the territory had no access to clean water. That was a crazy sentence to read. By October, more than 300 humanitarian workers had died. These are humanitarian workers, and that was the thing, is this article was focusing not on like members of Hamas or members of the IOF, but literal humanitarian aid workers who had been targeted, who'd been killed very intentionally to prevent aid being given to Gazans. Christopher Lockyer, Secretary General of Médecins Sans Frontières, which is the French version of Doctors Without Borders, said he saw a pattern of deliberate attacks on humanitarians, health workers, journalists, UN personnel, schools, and homes. So, like, a very intentional targeting of humanitarian workers. And then this next quote was, in mid-October, with winter setting in, a State Department spokesman said that the amount of aid reaching Gazans had dropped to its lowest levels in a year. I don't even, these are things that's I'm reading these and I don't even know what to say to them. I don't even have the words to discuss the atrocities happening in Gaza right now. Yeah, it's just fucking terrible. It's just terrible. That was everything that I had highlighted from the November 4th issue of the New Yorker. Let's move forward. This is a really fun video that's happening. So, the November 11th issue of the New Yorker. Technically, this came out after the election, but it doesn't really respond to the election because obviously the election was November 10th, I believe. So, this came out the next day. It wasn't. When was the election? November 8th? The election was November 8th. So, there's not too many pieces in here. I'm not really sure which way the election will go when this went to print. There was a really interesting piece about Tucker Carlson. This was called Tucker Everlasting, and it's by Andrew Morantz. This guy went on the road with Tucker Carlson, who did a live tour over the summer, and it sort of talked about Tucker Carlson's political history and his career, and also where he's going now and the weird niche that he occupies in the GOP, and also how he kind of revolutionized his own job title. He really is in a unique position that's sort of unprecedented. So here is what I highlighted. For now and for the foreseeable future, this is what Trumpism after Trump looks like. It looks like Vanceism, which owes a heavy debt to Tuckerism. So yeah, Tucker Carlson and JD Vance have a pretty close friendship, and JD Vance spoke at Tucker Carlson's live tour multiple times at multiple different stops. And so this journalist is saying that Tucker Carlson created the platform out of which JD Vance and Donald Trump could rise, and JD Vance, even more than Donald Trump, owes his whole shtick to Tucker Carlson, which is just interesting because Tucker Carlson isn't a politician. He was, a correspondent, a pundit, but he isn't a politician. There were so many good articles I read. I did highlight or bookmark the ones that I felt were just very well written, that I felt really educated me on a topic, or that I just, even if it wasn't necessarily an education on a topic, provided a depth and breadth. And also it just clearly had an angle on the issue. What I really liked about this article was that it very gently made fun of Tucker Carlson. Still professional, but it did make fun of him, and I highlighted some examples of that, such as Carlson was once such a dyed-in-the-wool movement conservative that he had both a brother and a son named Buckley. That is a Tina Fey joke. It's so good. So this was about this idea that kind of became a hot topic during this current election, the idea of the socially liberal, fiscally conservative people, and that doesn't really exist as much anymore, and a rising trend is socially conservative, fiscally liberal, which is insane. And this quote said, despite the cliche that the average voter is socially liberal but fiscally conservative, Carlson insisted that the untapped majority was the opposite, nationalist on economics, fairly traditional on the social issues. And remember, he was saying all this before the election, and the data did show that is how people were voting. So sometimes a broken clock is right twice a day. Oh, another little dig at Carlson that was kind of funny. A few fans wear Carlson merch such as a t-shirt that read, "No one can cancel Tucker." Fun fact, probably true, if only because, as Carlson sometimes says, I don't even know what I do for a living at this point. Which is so true. What is his job? Because he got fired from Fox News. Before that, he was on CNN. Literally, what is his job? He had an X, me saying X like I'm a fucking narc, a Twitter live show, Tucker on X or something. Oh, here's another good one. His hair was elegantly rumpled as if he'd just been awakened from a nap on a friend's yacht. Excellent fucking sentence. That was so good. He's the worst. I hate Tucker Carlson. Yeah, throughout this whole story, he's talking about the year 1985, how Tucker Carlson's obsessed with this year as the lost perfect time in American history, which I find interesting because I think usually when conservatives talk about this lost perfect time in American history. They're kind of talking about the 1950s. And I guess Tucker Carlson's just younger than that. So to him, it's like the 80s? I don't know. So weird. I guess he's trying to appeal to like a Reaganist voter base, because Reagan still has an insane popularity rating, which baffles the mind, to say the least. But what doesn't in American politics at this point? So I found that really interesting. This whole story is just basically about like what he would talk about on stage every night at this show that he was doing, and just like what a weird space he occupies in the political sphere. So it was interesting. And then the only other thing I bookmarked from this edition was my favorite cartoon of the month. And it was my favorite of the month. I thought this was so funny. It's so funny. Like, it's not that funny, but it's adorable. So, and it's like, I exhaled through my nose. So the first edition that really is like post-election is the November 18th one. And they even reflect that in the cover, which is this beautiful outline of Donald Trump. There was just a lot of great stuff to read about politics. My first one was from Talk of the Town again. Obviously, this entire edition was basically about the election. There was one thing I highlighted, which was the day after the election on a White House tour. These two women, the journalist was like following. Who wrote this? Sarah Larson. Sarah Larson was following around these women on a White House tour, and a Secret Service agent was speaking to them about their like election depression, post-election depression, and he said, "It's 4 years. Do something positive for someone else every day. Mentor a young person. Do good work. Be involved in your community. That makes a difference." And yeah, you can say that's like cheesy or whatever, but it is true. Like, community is like, working in small communities is the quickest way and the most efficient way to affect change. Like, large-scale change is just like, doesn't happen very often. I liked that. I highlighted it. But the thing I bookmarked was this article in this section called Bad Time. It was written by Jake Offenhartz, and it profiled Marvin Schneider and Forrest Markowitz, who are the two guys who go around to New York City's public clocks and make sure that they're keeping time correctly. And it's sort of a lost art, and a lot of clocks have fallen out of repair because there's not a very big department and people aren't calling about them, and everyone just uses their phones now, and so like no one really is noticing. But it was cute. And, you know, there's so many public clocks or, like, famous buildings with clocks on the outside in New York, and I've never thought about who's tuning them to keep in time. So I thought that was really cool to read. And that's why I really like this section. It's always, like, little, like, nuggets like that just make me think about the world differently. And, like, there's so many people doing so many niche and interesting things. Like, throughout this section in each magazine, each edition, you'll see stories about, like, the randomest little clubs that have formed for like niche little interests, like, or yeah, people tuning clocks who have been doing it like their entire life. Like, they're both like elderly, and one is technically the other's apprentice, but they've both been doing it for like 60 years or something. So it's cool. Like, I love reading that stuff. It makes me feel connected to a global community, and also like people are so silly and fun and like are capable of really beautiful tiny things and are weird and great. So yeah. Okay, so then as their like post-election thing, they did this section where they had a bunch of famous writers write in, and it was called Dispatches, and it's just sort of different famous writers reacting to the election. So this one was called American Fascist, and it was written by Timothy Snyder. And it talks about like what is fascism, like, genuinely, because it's a word that gets thrown around a lot nowadays. Like, people on the left will call people on the right fascist, people on the right will even call people on the left fascist, which is hilarious. It's a right-wing ideology by nature, but people don't know what they're talking about, so it's fine. And this guy was this guy, Timothy Snyder, was discussing what fascism actually is and how Trump genuinely is a fascist, like the way that he appeals to certain fascist ideas. And it was scary. And also, like, how Trump has, like, a weird charisma. And, like, even if it doesn't resonate with you, it resonates with someone. And, like, it has to be noted about him. Like, the left likes to portray Donald Trump as, like, a bumbling idiot. And he is. But he also has, like, a strange charisma, which is why he was so successful on TV for all those years. But he also talked about how the media amplifies Trump's presence because they report on everything. Like, even, like, moderate or left-wing media will report on everything Trump says or does. They kept him in the news cycle for years following the 2020 election because of all the indictments. And by doing that, they're amplifying his message, and control of the media is a huge way that fascism can flourish. And in his way, Trump does sort of control the media because every news story is about him, even when he's not the president. So, let's talk about how, like, we are sort of supporting fascism by talking about this guy so much. I bookmarked Womanhood as Defined by Man. This was written by one of my favorite essayist, journalist, Gia Tolentino. She wrote a book called Trick Mirror, which had a series of essays in it, and they literally changed my life. Like, not to be cliched, but they literally changed my life. They changed the way that I saw, like, womanhood and the world and capitalism and all this stuff. I really highly recommend her book. I wish she would write another one. This article was about the vote split between men and women in the election and how so many young men ended up voting for Trump simply because they want to control women, and that was, like, an appealing part of Trump's message. So here's what I highlighted. Men who voted for Trump fear what women might actually want. Women who voted for Harris fear what will be done to them against their will. In the imaginary world ruled by angry lesbian socialist girl bosses, there is absolutely nothing to stop you from being a barefoot pregnant homemaker at 24 if you'd like to be one. In the increasingly non-hypothetical world ruled by far-right Trumpists, the blissful servitude of women must be ensured by removing their control over their bodies, and ideally actually by removing them from the public sphere altogether. So yeah, this is the thing. Like, you always had the option of homesteading, of ballerina farming, of Nara smithing, but now, like, it's quickly becoming, like, if not just highly encouraged, then, like, you get punished for not doing that. Oh, and then this line was crazy. Jesus famously bled to death to give new life, as many girls and women in conservative states will over the next 4 years. Pew. I don't actually want to drop my mic. Yeah. And yeah. Yeah. When you ban abortion because you're a good Christian and this is not what Jesus wanted, I don't think Jesus wanted women bleeding to death in hospital parking lots, frankly. The next thing I highlighted was the conflict that exists between work and parenting, between childlessness and child rearing, even between wanting power over men and willingly giving them power over you, flares not in the gap between a liberal woman and a conservative woman, but within each of their individual lives. She's just, like, you get it. Like, she's so adept at putting the modern female experience into words. This, like, duality that exists within all women, this fight of conservatism and liberalism that exists within all women that has sort of become publicized in the last few years, like, in our political sphere with deadly consequences. So I thought that was a great piece. I bookmarked a different cartoon I forgot about. I will insert a picture. Notice how its quack seems to follow you around the room. So funny. I love it. I don't like most New Yorker cartoons. These are two that I liked. The last thing that I bookmarked in this edition was a piece called Stuck on You by Jackson Arn about a small tattoo convention in New York, not even the biggest one in New York. And he talked about, like, all the different tattoos he saw and the relationship between tattoo artists and tattooed people, and how like the history of tattoos and all this stuff. And it was just a funny piece. I think it was just like well written and like nice, a good human interest story. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't have anything like highlighted from that piece, and there's not that much depth to it. But yeah, I thought it was cool, and it sort of pushed for like a more scholarly approach to tattoo as an art form, and like recognizing tattoos as a legitimate art and not just like this rebellious countercultural thing. Not that doesn't matter, like that's important too. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, there's so many beautiful, amazing tattoos out there and talented tattoo artists. So yeah, that was the November 18th issue. Finally, the November 25th issue of the New Yorker. Sorry, my cover is ripped, but it's a picture of, I believe this is the Brooklyn Bridge. Could be the GW, I'm not sure. All right, what did I bookmark in here? This was the most recent issue, of course. I finished it not too long ago. Oh, yes. So starting off with a massive bang in this issue, we had an essay from the brilliant David Sedaris. David Sedaris is probably my favorite nonfiction writer, up there with Joan Didion. Everything I've ever read of his, I've loved. And the best compliment I've ever received was my friend told me that I view the world in a similar way to David Sedaris. He's probably one of my biggest inspirations as a writer, to be honest, even though I write fiction. David Sedaris, I love you. I love you. I will always be thankful to my high school teacher who introduced me to you. So this was a little story he wrote about driving from, Maine? They're driving from Maine to New York City because their flight got canceled, and they took this random girl who was supposed to be on their flight and drove with her, and it was like a silly little story about him and his husband and this girl that they picked up along the way. He's so talented. I love David Sedaris. If this is like your first time reading David Sedaris, I guess, yeah, you could start with this one. I haven't read everything he's ever written because he has a lot of books, but maybe when I have, I'll do a video about like, so you want to read David Sedaris, because I could talk about the guy for hours. This edition was so good. This might have been my favorite. I think this one was really good, but it was just super depressing. And the other two were like fine. This one I feel like had stories that I was like, whoa, like these are stories that I want to bring up at dinner parties. And this was one of them. This is called The Big Spin by Jennifer Gonnerman. And it is about the DA's office in Oakland, California, and how they were picking juries and they were breaking the law on dismissing jurors based on race, gender, religious beliefs, stuff like that. And all this evidence was found that they were like keeping note cards being like, dismiss, he's Jewish and he'll be against the death penalty, because they were trying to get people who would be the most in favor of the death penalty, because they have this thing called, in the DA's office, there's a group called the Death Squad, which is attorneys who are assigned to death penalty cases, and they are seen as succeeding if they can get the jury to decide on the death penalty, because it means that they convince them very thoroughly, like to the point that they felt like the defendant should be condemned to death. Crazy shit. This felt like real life Better Call Saul, kind of. Maybe I'm just watching Better Call Saul, so that's what it made me think of, but just like corrupt lawyer behavior. It was a crazy read. There was so many twists and turns. There was so much infighting and drama, and like, yeah, it was really good. I highly recommend. And there was a profile on the director Marielle Heller. She is the director behind the adaptation of Night Bitch, which hasn't come out yet, but has been getting some negative attention. Mostly just because the trailer, it just seems very different from the book. I read the book and the movie seems very different. After reading the profile of the director, it made me want to watch the movie and like see what she was trying to go for. I think it is going to be very different from the source material, because the author of the article, Emily Nussbaum, who is quite prolific on Twitter. She uses these terms hetero pessimist and hetero optimist, and she says that Marielle Heller is a hetero optimist. Like, she believes in straight marriages, and not like believes in like only straight marriages, but that like she like has a happy heterosexual marriage with the guy who plays Booth Jonathan on Girls. I mean, he does other stuff, but that's how I know him. He's Booth Jonathan. He's Booth Jonathan. They're in like a happy marriage, like, and they talk about like struggles they've gone through as a couple, but like they are happy. And in the book, that couple is like pretty unhappy, and it's what Emily Nussbaum refers to as a hetero pessimist book. So she flips all that because she wanted the movie to like fit in more with, I guess, her experience. And like, it was really interesting reading the piece because it's clearly a very personal work of art. It's about being a mother and a director, and like how hard it is as a woman director and all this stuff. And there was just a lot of nuance. I thought the stuff about the relationship, the marriage, was very interesting. Marielle Heller also directed Diary of a Teenage Girl, was her debut, and I loved that movie when I was in high school, and the journey to get that made was like crazy. That was a huge part of this article. Like, she worked on it for years, and it just took so much effort to even get it made. Like, no one wanted to adapt it because it's like kind of dense, difficult subject matter, but she got actors involved because her husband was a writer for SNL and he had actor connects, and like meanwhile she was like a struggling artist and all this stuff. It was so interesting. So I kind of want to go see the Night Bitch movie, and then maybe I'll make a video about the book versus the movie, because a lot of people were shit talking it on Twitter and I was liking those posts, but maybe now I'll look at it with different eyes. But it was a really interesting article. If you care at all about like what it means to be a female artist or like a female director, or especially, you should watch it. So, of all the short stories that were published in these 4 editions of The New Yorker, I only liked one of them. I don't always love The New Yorker's fiction, and that's okay, but this one I actually did like, and I wrote down the name of the author because I want to find more books by him. This was called Minimum Payment Due by Saeed Sayarifzadeh. I hope I pronounced that okay. It was a good short story. I don't know if I would classify it as flash fiction, but it was short, and it's about a person with insane amounts of debt, and then they sort of end up at this weird cult meeting. But I don't know, I don't want to give too much away. It was a good short story. You should check it out. It was the only one of the month of November that I genuinely liked. But hey, now I found a new writer that I like. Those were all the New Yorkers in November. I haven't even been talking for that long, but I guess, to be fair, a lot of like the articles from the first 2 editions, it's like I read those weeks ago and I don't totally remember every detail about them, but if I bookmarked them, then I trust myself that it means that there was something good in there. So if any of these like brief descriptions sort of sparked your interest, definitely check out these articles. Obviously, The New Yorker doesn't need me to sing its praises. Like, it's a world-renowned magazine. I really enjoyed committing to reading every week's edition because that, and then I also like to listen to the New York Times daily podcast. Between the 2 of those, I feel very well informed about political events and like world events, and I feel like I could walk into any political conversation or like dinner party with adults and hold my own, and that is a really great feeling. So if you want to feel that way, I recommend The New Yorker. I think that's about it. Oh, I'll say my favorite cover. I think my favorite cover was the marathon one, November 4th. And my least favorite was this. I don't need to see this. I know I have another 4 years to look forward to it. I don't need to see this face or body ever again. Quite frankly, I'm so over it. C'est la vie. Okay, happy December. It's November 30th as I'm filming this. I'm going to upload this tonight so that I'm uploading it in November. But happy December. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.